guys. So I'm gonna try this again. I wanted to resume talking about healed energy, and I'm having some anxiety today. It's okay. I know a lot about anxiety and how terrifying it can be. The body symptoms, the mental and emotional anguish. I know a lot about it. So and sometimes you just have to breathe. I know that sounds whatever, but sometimes just some really deep breaths will bring it down. And it really can hit from out of nowhere. I know all about anxiety attacks, panic attacks, um, and they feel so real. It sometimes it can take many years for you to accept the fact that it really is this phenomenon that is happening to you that a lot of times doesn't have any real physical cause. It seems like it's so real and that there's got to be something dreadfully wrong with me. There's got to be. Okay, so that's how you feel, right? And there's a lot I can share with younger people or just people in general about my anxiety experiences, and how I learned to cope with them over the years. And for the most part, be able to get above it and get beyond it and decrease its power over me. Said the mailman. But yeah, I'm just kind of having one of those days, and it kind of came on all of a sudden. Like, I haven't been having anxiety attacks. Can you please stop, sir? I think it's the mailman. Chill. But I have to put it in perspective. Number one, I just ate. There we go. There are things in our physical body that can cause it, but they aren't anything to get alarmed about. They aren't anything threatening but sometimes things within our physical body or things that have occurred in our environment. The first thing to gain power over anxiety is knowledge, identifying the trigger. Because sometimes it comes so suddenly and you are fine. You're in the middle of reading a book or you're doing anything. You're enjoying your day. Mine started earlier. I had just started my video and I was just going to talk and chill. It can come on at the weirdest times when you're trying to go to bed or just chilling. Okay, well, and then you feel this rush of adrenaline, this fight or flight. Everybody feels it differently. So many bodily symptoms, from weird taste in your mouth to your hair tingling to back pain to it just has so many physical manifestations. And it pulls a new one all the time to have you confused and like, thrown off, and you just got used to the one that was like felt like it was choking you and the knot in your throat all the time, and now it's doing this. And it turns out it's just another manifestation of anxiety. Now, I'm 47 years old. I've been going through this since I was 17. So I've had years and years and years and years and many more years of knowledge, physical experience, trial and error, terror, having to go through it. But, it's going to be different for everybody. The trigger, the cause, the root cause, where it's coming from and why. Okay, and I'm going to say, first and foremost, many of those early years I spent with professionals. I spent either at the therapist's office, calling her up on the phone in tears, terrified, or in the emergency room, getting tested for this, that, or the other. I suffered a lot of years, especially in my early years. a lot of terror, night terrors, phobias. I don't have a personality disorder. My whole family has had thorough testing. We've had the same professional in our life for 30 years now, who still works with and knows all of us to this day on, on again, off again basis, when needed. And I have PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder with panic attacks, and obsessive compulsive traits. If you were to pull out my paperwork and my testing, that's what it would say. Now, those are anxiety disorders. They're not personality disorders, okay? But it's a struggle. And even though I've never been medicated for it, never taken medication, really other than my teens, smoking pot off and on and trying a couple things here and there and drinking alcohol in my 20s and 30s on weekends, really most of my lifetime, there were no medications, there were no antidepressants, there was no treatment for anything, and there were no substances at all, period. Hardly a Tylenol. Partly due to my fucking anxiety disorder. I was too phobic to do drugs. I was too fucking phobic. I would panic about taking the medication that was going to help me. In fact, when I finally gave in some years ago and needed a beta blocker for my heart rate, because anxiety was really stepping over the line at that point. Now, I never took medication to, that altered my brain or, anti-anxieties, or trust me, they might have helped, and they help a lot of people if they're not abused. But I pretty much wanted to get through my life doing everything as naturally as possible. Part of that was terror of pills and drugs. But when I gave in and I finally got on a beta blocker, because whatever was going on within my particular body, my system, my fight or flight, the fucker was getting stuck. It was going off for no reason, tied into my hormonal time. That's when it was the worst. And my heart rate would go from resting to 130, 140, 150 for no fucking reason and get stuck there. This was 12 years ago. This is before I had ever heard of SVT, which took my heart to 225. I never knew back 12, 13 years ago that 140, 150 was nothing, and that it would actually one day get worse and take me to another place. So, I'm just sharing with you guys, if this is boring, that's okay. Click away. If it's something useful and helpful, okay too, but these are some things I really just want to share with people. But 12, 13 years ago, when the worst physical symptoms of my anxiety started to rear their ugly head, and believe me, I have all kinds of tales from the time I was 17, 18, 20, 22, all through my 20s, being agoraphobic and panic attacks and phobias and hospitals and, but I was able to get through it without medication, with the guidance of my therapist, the love of my children's father. I had 2 little boys to raise. That kept me grounded, and somehow I was able to push through. But anyway, getting on into my 30s, when my kids were teenagers, there came a point in my life where things just reached a breaking point. Not only the outer stress in my life of raising 2 preteen kids at that time, and going to college, and working and trying to make a living and balance my money, and knowing the family I come from, knowing the genetics I have, knowing the struggles and the emotional problems I have, and that every one of my family members have, trying to keep my balance with all that, and always letting my attention go sidetrack off into getting involved with some person who is addicted and having all kinds of issues themselves, but yet quite self-destructive and not focused on the path I was on at the time of therapy and just trying to fucking get a grip on myself, not trying to substance out of my head or make it worse, And so that was always a deterrent for me. So outer things would go on, the stress of, life and having a dysfunctional, traumatic family situations and, involvements with friends and relationship shit that would really get me down. And all that outer stuff would be going on. But it was my system. It was still shit coming up from my childhood that I had not worked all the way through. And all that programming of violence and fear and terror in my childhood and early teen years and all that shit was coming back on me, man. And the way I am wired genetically, my heart, my fight or flight, being around all of that shit I was around as a child, that's how I developed PTSD. And so my nervous system developed like it did. And I don't know. I can't even explain it. It's partly tied to my hormones every month, which I really struggle mentally, emotionally, and physically. And that was when the panic attacks would be the absolute worst, is when I would have PMS every month. And it would be just horrifying. I would have to call the ambulance out every single month, sometimes 2 and 3 times during that week. But I was kind of used to that. And I was like, it's just that. It's the hormone thing. It's anxiety. It's going to go away. It'll be fine. But one time it didn't. It started up. This is 12 or 13 years ago. It started up. Every day I would notice my heart just fluttering and beating out of my chest and just imagine, purring, buzzing like a bee, just fucking like a rabbit. And I didn't do any drugs. I didn't do any substances. I barely took Tylenol back then. I just couldn't imagine. And I would be at home alone, just doing my dishes and smelling the dish soap. And, kids would be at school. And I kept my home very calm as possible, like a sanctuary. Very few people got in there. Now, I won't say it didn't get crazy. Sometimes, I would let folks come in and out sometimes. And, sometimes disagreements would happen, or sometimes I'd have family gatherings and, things could get a little chaotic. But for the most part, just the boys and me, it was a very calm, and I'd be alone. And I had gotten to a point where I was very accustomed to that. I really liked my quiet and solitude time. And then I would look forward to the children coming home, but I had no fear of being alone. None of that shit. Craved that beautiful solitude time where I could hear myself think and, do things, create. And my heart just got stuck at about 140, 150. And it didn't matter if I would go lay down and try to rest, or it was trucking away at 140, 150. And I knew this was terribly abnormal, and I was scared to death. And I went through about a week of that, calling the ambulance. And from what they could tell, it's just high. We can't find anything wrong. And, just terrified, going to my mom's, just really not knowing what to do. And it's just kind of stuck there. And, wow. I'll never forget how terrifying that was. I've been through some really terrifying things. That's why when people look at me today, that's not even mentioning the SVT and the 225 heart rate and fucking pneumonia that I couldn't breathe at all to even get up and walk across the room. If I were to go into detail about some of the horrific, terrifying things, but that's why when people look at me today and ask, how can you still be so happy? How can you still be so delightful about life? How can you still have the heart that you do? How do you still connect? And how has this not left you fucking just bitter and terrified and just completely out of it? And, believe me, it's a struggle. It is something I have to actually put effort into working on and, make that a thing. But I remember how terrifying this was. And the reason why I brought it up is because I went to a doctor finally, a family practitioner, and he did some testing. And it's doing it right now. And it hasn't done that to me in quite some time. Kind of palpitating a little bit, but I just ate. And it was doing that to me last year after I would eat, where the blood sugar and all the chemicals in the body would change and get stabilized, and I would have palpitations. But I went to this family practitioner. It's funny how it comes and goes, though. And it'll go away and it won't do it to you for a month or 6 months or a year. And then it'll come back. But so maybe I ate too fast. But the family practitioner told me he did all this testing, but I didn't go to a cardiologist back then. That would be later years. But he did some blood work. He did some another, EKG, all the testing they could possibly really do without going to a cardiologist, and couldn't find anything wrong. And he would tell me it was perplexing, but it didn't look as though anything was wrong. I just had too much adrenaline. And so that would indicate that, yes, my fight or flight malfunctions. And it's terrifying. And you guys who have panic attacks and anxiety, the terror of just being okay one minute and then for no reason, all of this adrenaline and the fear hormone shooting through your body, and then your heart's doing this, it can be debilitating. It can basically ruin your life. It can take over your life. It can make you afraid to talk to people. It can make you afraid to go to work. It can make you afraid of public spaces. You become agoraphobic because you are afraid that this is going to strike at random anywhere you might be, and it starts to control your life. Well, I can't go to this place. I can only go certain places where, this, and this, depending on your specific case. I've had other family members who have it just like me, but it depends on whatever makes them feel safe. I can't go unless this is here. I have access to a phone. Oh, fuck no, that's way too far out in the country. I could never be out there because an ambulance couldn't get there fast enough. Or, I'm going to have this attack in front of everyone and it's going to be so embarrassing. Or, no, I can't go around those people or to that particular kind of place or that job or this or that, because those people are not very open-minded and they don't listen. You get very sensitive to people's energies, and you have to have people in your life that either have anxiety like you or that are very empathic and willing to listen. Like they can pick up on, now see, I'm about to burp. Sorry, I know that's nasty, but I've been sitting here really concerned, like, holy shit, having these little heart palpitations and skipping a beat and rationalizing like, okay, you just ate. You didn't overeat, but you just ate lunch. You were getting pretty damn hungry. It's late in the day. You waited a little bit late. And then your sugars, all that's stabilizing. What can happen. It's probably gas buildup. It's probably all that shit, chemicals. But anxiety will make you so terrified that you will question it. It doesn't matter. Even if okay, I know it's anxiety, it's going to pass, it can't hurt me. It doesn't matter. It still feels terrifying. And you need somebody to talk to. You need somebody to hold on to during that time. I know several people like that. And that's why I have often stopped my fucking day in its tracks. If I was at work, I'll pull over on the side of the road. When I was self-employed, of course. That's why I like being self-employed. I like flexible work. But that's not to say I want to be taken advantage of and people calling me every minute of the fucking day with those kind of needs. And then, on top of that, not even fucking appreciate it. Treat me like all shit. And not appreciate the fact that they were able to rely on me for that, to give them a kind and empathic and compassionate listen and shoulder and boost on to go on through their attacks. That's not right. And I've had people do me like that. Think they can just come to me for that and rely on me for that, but then treat me like crap. Like I'm supposed to be at their beck and call and not even show any fucking appreciation at all. That's when I have to go on and cancel that out. But it can be really scary, guys. So anyway, all those years ago, the family practitioner said what he said, and he said, I'm going to put you on a beta blocker. That's when I first got on my beta blockers. This was, I would say, 2011. No, wait. I think it was around 2012, 2013. That's when it was. It was when I had finished up my associate's degree. I had moved over to the university. I was going to pursue my bachelor's. Some things in my life were changing. A person I was very, very close to had left the state and wasn't going to be coming back anytime soon. Some things had up and changed very, very suddenly. And I guess I could attribute it to that. I don't know. But it was horrifying. And the point I was trying to bring up is that I took no medications at that time. Nothing. No pills, no drugs, no substances, not hardly even Tylenol. This was before my addiction to opiates. And I was so terrified when they put me on that new beta blocker. But I knew I had to give in and do it. I did my research. It does not cross the brain barrier. It's not a narcotic or anything like that. It doesn't make you woo-woo or hoo-hoo or feel out of control. I always feared that feeling. But it blocks the effect of adrenaline on the heart. It just does what it's supposed to. I'm not a doctor. I can't explain it all, but I know what it does and it works for me. They have many different types of beta blockers that target certain pathways and whatever your particular problem is, because some of us do have too much adrenaline or it malfunctions. And so what it does is it helps that not to malfunction in me, and it helps that heart not to run away when my hormones go through their thing every month. Whatever was triggering off inside of there, it's not a heart problem. In later years, I did visit a cardiologist. I was very grateful to be able to do that. And I did have a full heart workup, more in depth. But anyway, that is how I first got put on a beta blocker and why. And just going along the lines of talking about anxiety, this kind of goes with talking about healed energy versus unhealed, which it's really not the path I expected the video to go, but since I'm having anxiety, I'll just go ahead and do it like this. And I was so terrified to take that pill, y'all, to take that fucking beta blocker. It was crazy. My sister had to go to the pharmacy with me and literally hold my hand. And I was so scared. But I was more scared standing there with my heart racing out of my chest. And I couldn't wait to get some relief. So, I really didn't have a choice. And I took it. And it didn't do anything to my mind, but within about 30 to 40 minutes, maybe an hour, I started to notice a difference. Some people take them for stage fright, plane trips. back then I was on a more powerful one called Nadolol. And I was on that thing for about 10 years and it worked wonderfully for me. But then doctors began to say, this has too many bad side effects. We're going to get rid of it. We're wanting to put people on other stuff. So they changed mine. And I really liked that one. It worked so well for me. And I stopped taking it. I would forget to take it. Like after being on the shit about 8 or 9 years. When I was with Chad, I kind of skipped out on it for, a year or so. And, thought I could get by without it. And by the time I ended up back at the doctor's office needing to get back on a beta blocker, this is what they informed me. That they are no longer prescribing Nadolol, that they would change me to something else because it was dangerous. It had bad side effects. And I was like, what? Because, I remember you're not supposed to do that. But I had been taking Chad's, okay? Because I was supposed to take Nadolol 10 milligrams and Chad, they were prescribing him 40 milligrams. I mean, when we first got together, they had this guy on enough meds to sedate a racehorse. I thought 40 milligrams of Nadolol, 10 milligrams puts me in the dirt. I mean, and that is not like a narcotic way. It's not in an intoxicated way. It's almost like a blood pressure medication. The first 4 months, it took me 4 months for my body to adjust to that beta blocker. Now, my body's caught up to it, but for 4 months, I felt like my body was moving in quicksand. It was heavy and it wasn't a brain thing, though. I didn't feel confused or anything like that. My mind was clear, but you will definitely notice a difference. It's going to slow you down. And for the first 3 or 4 months, it was all I could do to just make it to work, get in the evening, fix my boys something to eat, and get myself ready for bed, get us ready for bed and go to bed. And I had to live really, simple like that for several months, adjusting to that med. And then I adjusted. It started feeling like me again, and just without the heart being able to race out of my chest and go crazy and have these fight or flight adrenaline attacks, anxiety attacks. Now, are they going to get rid of your anxiety? No. Are they going to get rid of the mental and emotional anguish and all of that side of it? No. All the beta blocker takes care of is so that your heart doesn't race out of control. And, and that helps a lot. That helps your mental and your emotional anxiety and anguish a whole hell of a lot, to at least not think, oh my God, something's happening to me. So yeah, the beta blocker will definitely get that under control. But as time went on, like I said, Chad and I got together and I continued with my beta blocker for quite a few years. And then I stopped getting it refilled. And I found out, well, he's on the exact same medication and it's not narcotic or anything like that. And he takes, God, twice as much as me. And he had gotten to the point where maybe they had taken him off of it and he just had a whole bunch of it left, or maybe he had changed meds. He wasn't taking his a whole lot either, and he had a lot of it. And so I would quarter his 40 milligram tablets and I would take my 10 milligram dose. And yeah, it kept me in check. And I guess it's when I stopped doing that SVT started. And I've often pronounced it wrong, supraventricular tachycardia. It's I'd have to look up the exact word, but that's what it stands for. And I just thought my heart was racing back then. Hadn't seen shit yet. I will look up the correct word. But yeah. So some time went on and I quit taking them all together. Quit dosing myself, and some time went by, but I can't blame it totally on going off that beta blocker. That probably factored into it some. But the extreme stress I was under living with an alcoholic and the chaos that we had to live through, and what he was acting like at that time, and the pandemic that year, all of those factors combined, okay, by November of 2020, something even more terrifying would happen to me. I mean, this is after we got through pandemics. This is after Chad and I had already been through all kinds of trauma and chaos, and, you know, his alcoholism and all kinds of losses in our families and crazy shit going on. And you would think everything would calm down, but here's the thing about PTSD and anxiety and panic. It's after the fact, post-stress. After the fact stress is basically what that is. Now, again, I'm going to always tell y'all, I always tell people, go to a doctor. I did. I have. I always have. I lived in and out of the doctor's office, the ER, the family practitioner, the therapist, whoever the hell I could get my hands on in my 20s especially. Don't go without seeing a doctor. Don't be afraid of doctors. Our young men especially. Y'all don't have to be so tough. We're not expecting that. Nobody's judging y'all. You know, I'm just saying. It is always best. Go to a doctor. Don't listen to just my story. Don't listen to what your neighbor tells you. Because your body's not their body. It's not going to turn out for you exactly like it turned out for them. It might. That might give you some peace, and, you know, I'm sure everything will be just fine. But it's always best, please, have a checkup from your doctor. And if you don't have insurance, if you can't pay for it, go to the fucking ER if you have to. Don't take chances, especially when it comes to your heart. Anything like that, anything that seems abnormal to you, go have it checked. Call an ambulance, go to the ER, and always consult with a professional on anything where it seems really serious and beyond your control. We are in the day and age where we can talk to each other and we can swap stories and we can comfort one another, but we're not professionals. We don't have those licenses. We don't, we don't know for sure any of that. So always get yourself checked. And I know that can be scary. I didn't want to go to the cardiologist. I was terrified. And I went with another friend of mine to the cardiologist back some years ago. And I remember thinking, God, this must be terrifying for her. I would never want to have to go to the cardiologist. I wouldn't want to have to be in that position where I was having those kind of troubles where they were questioning things and needed to look that deeply at my heart. How terrifying. And I remember going with her and sitting with her during that process. I've sat with quite a few people through quite a few terrifying processes in their life. And that's another reason why when people look at me and they want to know, why are you on that wavelength where you just are so appreciative and you try to be so grateful for life, for the small things. And you really just want to keep things on this. It's not that I'm self-righteous or I want to be boring, or it's none of those fucking things. It's that I have seen some of the most horrific fucking shit you could ever imagine. And that will give you some perspective. It'll change things for you, I've seen a lot of scary stuff. And I'm just on a different wavelength. I don't like to take life for granted. I don't like to waste time. It feels, a lot of my anger and reaction rage would come from wanting to be different and seeing things in a different way than almost everything that had ever been handed down, passed down, surrounded, than the norm that everybody was handling their shit with, how they were coping with their stress and how they were, you know, a lot of my anger came from really wanting to be different and not wanting to think or accept that I had been born into a lifestyle, into a family, into a position in life where I may not stand a chance, where the odds would be so heavily stacked against me, not only from my own self and my own having to keep my own self corrected, but from what everyone surrounding me. And that will create a lot of anger and resentment inside of you if you're constantly being pulled off of what your heart is called to, your mission in life, your dreams and goals, and how you want to feel and live and experience. And you're constantly being pulled away from that and sacrificed, starting from the time you're little, for some fucking person's, starting with your parents, because of their lack of maturity and their fucking addictions and the way they chose to cope with shit. And it just spreads on it through your life, where you feel like you're being pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled for your goodness, for your nurturing, for what light is left in you to, you know. And I see it in a very compassionate way. I don't have any anger or resentment anymore because so many people are suffering. We're all suffering, but just trying to explain, in case anyone questions it, why resentment and anger could build up in you in a situation like that. Because that low vibrational energy, it's like some dark energy attachment force that globs onto people. And anyone in that energy field who is heavily, heavily addicted, unable to get out of their depression, their misery, their nightmares, their bad feelings, anybody who is stuck in that energy field and unable to work through it, refusing to work through it, completely checked out on substances and alcohol, whatever, it's like a parasitic force. It's like they have a parasite on them, like a vampire. And that energy runs all through them. And if you get a bunch of people at once that's going on with, it is almost like you don't stand a chance. No matter how pure or strong, or no matter how you try to stay focused, they won't stop coming. That force attached onto them will not stop. It doesn't have, and it's hard to see it like that. Those are your relatives. Those are your friends. You love these people. And so that's why I've always seen it multidimensionally. I know that it's them, and they are ultimately, we as a human, we are ultimately responsible for what we let in our body. How did it get attached onto us in the first place? And what has taken us so long to become disgusted or realize that we have an attachment on us? And what has taken us so long to identify the root cause of it? How the fuck it got in and attached onto us in the first place, and expressing itself through addiction, alcoholism, lying, manipulating, cheating, stealing, upsetting people, reckless, careless behavior, self-destructing, putting problems all over other people. What's taken us so long to address this shit? And, so yeah, it's like a parasitic thing, and I can see both. We are responsible for that. If we allow ourselves to stay down too long, it will spiral. What I mean by dark entity attachment is not some little red man with fucking horns. I don't like it when people take it out of context. what I mean by a dark entity attachment and a parasitic being and force and energy on us. Okay, what I mean by that is not being able, either refusing or being unaware or just not lazy, defiant, not acquiring healthy coping skills necessary to keep ourselves thriving and functioning, and from letting that be wide open. Therefore, we hurt other people, we use other people, we wreck entire family systems. It's like a big tornado. That's what I mean by dark entity attachment. That when we were down in our worst, our depression, our grief, our anger, our sorrow, our pain, whatever trauma, whatever was happening, it was the way we handled it. Reached out for, fuck it, I'll get drunk, I'll get high, or I'll just distract myself with this shallow, superficial entertainment shit, or sexuality, or that's what I'm talking about. And believe me, I've done it all. I have done it all. I've participated in and gone through just about every level and cycle in my life. So I'm not shaming anyone. I'm just speaking about what happens. And when we're down in it like that, we are responsible for how we cope with pain, with anger, with bad times. And instead of reaching for lower vibrational coping mechanisms, it's our job, so that, not little red men, and no, but so that while we're already down that low, so that this vortex of dark energy doesn't keep growing and growing and feeding on us and feeding on us and opening us up to even darker thoughts and darker actions, and continuing to keep that wide open, that energy, so that, yes, even more dark energy can attach onto us and work through us. It's exactly what I mean. And one thought builds onto another thought, and it becomes more hopeless and more bound and consumed into that darkness. It's exactly what I mean. Instead of getting up and come up swinging. And by that, I mean a lot of things. I know how hard it is down there. I've been in those holes, in that void many times. But I mean reaching out for someone or something of the light. That means having to have the desire there and the willingness there. I'm going to call a therapist, or I'm going to call a best friend who is positive, who is light, who can talk with me. It means reaching out for something healthy. I want to do better. I want to find healthier ways to cope with this that ultimately aren't going to destroy me and make me destroy everybody around me. That's what I fucking mean by we are responsible for that. And I know the sound is probably going to clip off here any minute. It's been doing that lately when I get past a certain point on the video. But a lot of times I'll start these videos thinking I'm going to talk about one thing, and then whatever comes out. But I'm glad for it to be coming out, and I'm just going to keep doing it that way. But that's exactly what I mean when I say stuff like that. We are responsible for how we cope and protecting our energy from those kind of forces. And I've got a lot I could elaborate on addiction and energies. And the other day I was listening to Robert J. Grant, who's a fascinating speaker, and he discusses Edgar Cayce's work. Fascinating stuff, but he was talking about this very thing as far as, possession and addiction. To me, severe addiction, it is almost like that. So coming back full circle, I can see both. Yes, I can see that it is my beloved loved one, but at the same, and I hold people accountable because I would be bashed and judged if I said the wrong thing there. I hold myself and everyone else accountable in this life. Absolutely. You'll never sit up and hear me say, oh, well, the devil made them do it. So let's not get carried away. People tend to want to take everything you say out of context. Fuck no. We are responsible. But at the same time, I can see both. I can see that it is something so dark and so overwhelming and all consuming attached onto them, working through them, that I see both. That oftentimes I know that is not my loved one. That is not what deep in their soul they would really want to say and do, but it is so fucking beyond them. It is so, they are so deep in their addiction and they are so down in their trauma and so far from the light and the work and training and everything that could pull them out of it, that it's not them. And I've seen it. But it doesn't matter. I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to let anybody wrap me up in that. It doesn't matter if it was them or a spirit or what it was. Ultimately, they're responsible for what they chose to do with their pain. I'm responsible. I don't care if we are ultimately responsible for what we do with what happened to us when we were little kids and what we feel inside. And all of our anger and pain and sorrow, we're responsible for it. What we let inside of us. So, absolutely. But just because that's a fact and that's true, and we all will be held accountable, it doesn't mean I don't have deeper understanding and knowledge and can pick up on and see what is happening to people and what is working within them and how that's happening and how it feeds, because I've experienced it myself. I have felt it coming after me myself. I've had to fight for my life. That's why I can also give off that knowledge and experience. Not only because I've been so close to other people with dark entity attachments, parasitic thought forms and trauma and darkness just feeding on their souls and their light and their life force, coming through them, saying and doing things completely out of control, that yes, it is them, but at the same time, it is a version of them. And I've heard them speak about it. I've seen the tears fall down their fucking face and their hearts break because they can't get out, because they wanted so badly to love their family and do right by their families and be close to this one and do this right and hold down that job and do this, that, and the other. But whatever got them was so fucking powerful, so powerfully connected to the pain and trauma in them that they couldn't fight it off. This shit is a motherfucker. I'm not kidding you. It is a spiritual war out here on a lot of us, and it is no joke. So not only have I seen and felt and walked through that with people damn close to me, but I too have walked through it. And I too have had to fight against it. Fight for my fucking life to get it off of me. So I can give several different perspectives on it. But ultimately we're responsible, y'all. I know that. For whatever we let into our mind, for whatever we let, and it can be hard. Sometimes we don't mean to. Sometimes we never meant for any of that to happen. And shit happens. But, back to anxiety, and then I better cut this because it's getting so incredibly long. Yeah, anxiety is it's another one of those energies that wants to keep us in fear, wants to keep us consumed and bound in fear. Because where there is fear, there can be no love. We are distracted. We are fearful. We're annoyed. We're isolated. We aren't thriving. We're scared to go out. We're scared to connect. Where there is fear, there can be no love. There can be no connection. There can be no real light and work and thriving and beauty. I mean, it just can't where there is fear. And there are so many things that I feel like want to keep us in fear or try to keep us in complete and total terror and fear all the time. So I'll continue this a bit later. But yeah, anxiety is difficult, and ultimately, I'm still on my beta blocker to this day, though, and I swear by those. It really helps with malfunctioning, fight or flight, PTSD, adrenaline, panic attack. It really helps with the physical symptoms of that. Even though I am on a different beta blocker now that I take twice a day, that all in all does its job, but I didn't get to get into the SVT attacks. Once I got the racing heart squared away for 10